Hey, what's up guys? Thanks for clicking on the video. So for this one, we're going to be taking a look at a very special and colorful timepiece coming out from the Ball Watch Company. And that is this watch on my wrist. It's the Ball Engineer III Marvelight Chronometer Carrying Edition. So one of the things that makes this watch so special is that it is limited to 1,000 timepieces, and for each one that's purchased, they're going to donate 300 Swiss francs to the Salvation Army's Social Assistance Program to assist people during the global pandemic that we're facing. So I was actually quite excited when I reached out to Ball directly, and they agreed to lend in this watch for the review. And unfortunately, I will have to return it to them after this video is over, although I am going to consider purchasing one of these guys in the future. And I do want to mention that I have reviewed a few other Ball watches in the past, and in fact I'm going to link to the Ball Engineer II series of the Marvelight that I reviewed at the beginning of 2019, because I think that will give you a good overview of the specs for this watch, because it's quite similar. And in addition, for that video, I do go over some more background information on how this company was founded, as Webb C. Ball did help with the development of railroad standard time that's used by railroad conductors to this day. So let's flip the camera around right now, and you guys can actually take a close-up look at the Ball Engineer III Marvelight Carrying Edition in my studio. Alright, so now that we're in my studio, we can actually take a closer look at the Ball Engineer III Marvelight Chronometer Carrying Edition. Now I do have to admit, when I first picked up this watch in my hands, it did kind of remind me of a Rolex Milgauss, because the way the Milgauss has that colorful dial and similar laid out indices, although of course with the Ball here you're getting a 3 o'clock date aperture with a Cyclops. But while we're on the topic of the Rolex Milgauss, many people do associate that watch with its high anti-magnetic properties because it is resistant to up to 1000 Gauss. And Ball actually designs their case in the same fashion, so this watch is also anti-magnetic to 1000 Gauss, which is really impressive. And the other thing I'll mention that you can kind of compare the Ball Engineer Marvelight Series to when you're thinking about Rolex is the stainless steel that they use is actually 904L stainless steel, which is likened to Rolex's Oyster steel that they use on their sports steel models. And while I don't have a Rolex Milgauss in the collection, I'm just going to hold up the Marvelight here to my 39mm Rolex Explorer 214270. And with respect to finishing on the high polish and on the bracelet here, I do think they are kind of comparable. So I don't want to digress too much from the review, but let me know in the comments below what you guys think in terms of the overall fit and finish of the Ball, how it compares to something like a Rolex steel sports model. Okay, so for me, the hallmark feature of any Ball watch is their amazing use of tritium gas tubes for low light legibility. Now, tritium tubes are distinctly different than, say, superluminova or luminova paint that's used on other watches, because those do require the use of light to activate the luminescent material, and it fades over time. But with Ball, there is tritium gas housed inside each of those tubes for the hour markers as well as on the handset. And because tritium is a radioactive marker, it undergoes beta decay, and there's actually a phosphor layer that's around the gas tubes, and it interacts with the beta decay or the emission from tritium, and it generates emission of light that's visible to us, and it will continually give off light, and it has about a half-life of 12 years. Now, to highlight that point, Ball did hook me up with this nice UV torch, so I'm going to try and do this on camera just so you can actually see how intense these tritium tubes are. Now I'm actually going to drop in some B-roll footage of some low light shots of this timepiece, but you can see even in daylight when I shine the UV light on it, just the intensity of the colors on the dial is really impressive. Okay, let's go over some of the dimensions and technical specs for this timepiece. So this watch is well proportioned with a 40mm case diameter, and then if you flip it to the side, lug to lug between my thumbs comes in at 46.7mm. Case height is 13mm, and that's to the bottom of the case back to the top of this flat sapphire crystal. Although if you grab it to the top of that cyclops there, it's closer to 13.5mm in total height. So let's go in and talk about the dial for this watch, because it really is the star of the show. I think Ball was able to balance out the colors of this dial very well, so that you do have something that grabs your attention a little bit, but it doesn't go too far and make this watch look kind of gimmicky or too flashy. So for each of the hour markers, you do have the applied tritium gas tubes, and you can see it balances out the dial well, because whilst they are different colors, you do have similar colors on adjacent ends of the dial. So you can see like the 12 and the 6 are both done in green, the 3 and the 9 o'clock are both blue, and so on and so forth. You have different colors there. And while this watch is rugged enough to be a sports model, given the anti-magnetic, anti-shock properties, as well as water resistance, which we'll talk about later, I think this watch can also be dressed up really nicely, considering the case is done all in high polish, and you have a really nice Dolphin hand stack as well. I really love the hands on the Marvelight series from Ball, and I particularly enjoy the seconds hand with the counterbalanced RR symbol for railroad standard time. And the handset also incorporates tritium tubes as well, so it's easy to get a quick read on time in any lighting situation. And in fact, I will throw up a low light shot now, just so you can actually see how this watch looks in no lighting conditions and in the absence of a UV torch. And I do want to highlight the fact that the lume or phospholuminescence on this watch will outcompete pretty much any watch with normal luminova, even some strong divers from Seiko. After about 10 minutes in total darkness, I think this thing's going to crush the competition, and it's really one of the key selling points about this timepiece. Now, since this is a CLC chronometer, let's quickly talk about the Ball caliber RR113-C. I believe it is based off of an ETA 2824 movement. Although they do highly decorate that movement, there is a Ball custom rotor on it, and it also has their patented amortizer system, which is an anti-shock system that prevents any damage to the balance spring with high impacts. So really well spec'd watch, and with that ETA base movement, you do get a 4 Hz, so 28,800 vibration per hour sweep of a seconds hand there. You're getting about a 38 to 40 hour power reserve, and you can hack or manually wind this movement as well. Now if we flip the watch over, you can see again, very nice high polish done to the entire case. And it's basically a distortion-free type of polishing. I'm actually quite impressed with the level of finishing on this watch. Normally for an all-polished case, I do find it looks a little cheap if it's not done right, but this watch does it right for sure. So the high polish does extend to the bracelet. So it is a 20mm bracelet at the head of the watch, tapers down to about 18 near the clasp, which is well integrated. It's actually a butterfly style deployment clasp. So this is an H-link style bracelet with high polish on the centers. Very nice brushing kind of on the tops of the sides there. And then you do have a nice polish bevel that transitions into high polish on the flanks. And you can see that bracelet sizing, you can use slot screws to unscrew each individual link. And there are half links afforded near the deployment here. But unfortunately, because this is a butterfly clasp, there's no on-the-fly micro adjustment or different micro adjustment anchoring points on the clasp itself. You do have a ball written where the butterfly deployment is, and you just have to unclick both sides here, and it's a very nicely milled out portion for the butterfly deployment. And I do want to move in on the case back, because the engraving of the train engine here is done very well. I don't know how well it shows up on camera, but inside that train it does say Webb C. Ball, who is the founder of the company. And then you do get the information indicating that it is chronometer, it's anti-magnetic, and you do have the Tritium logo designation here for those Tritium tubes. So here's a quick wrist shot of how the Ball Engineer III Marvelight Carrying Edition sits on my 19 centimeter circumference wrist, and I think it's extremely comfortable. Now I do want to mention that when this watch was sent in to me, I did leave all of the links in place, and it fits my wrist like a glove. So I will caution, if anyone has over a 19 centimeter circumference wrist, you might want to look for some extra links, or you might want to consider putting it on a strap. Now I considered doing that for this video, but because this watch was lent in, I'm not going to take it off the supplied bracelet, but I will throw up some B-roll of my Engineer Marvelight 2 on a black leather strap, which I think you can see actually dresses it up quite well. Now before I mention any minor critiques, I do want to mention that the overall weight of this watch with all the links in comes in at a fairly hefty 173 grams, which isn't overbearing whatsoever. It is a very solidly constructed watch. Now I really don't have too many negative elements that I want to discuss about this watch. In fact, most of them are personal preferences. I do want to start off by highlighting one very minor QC issue that's really not even visible to the naked eye, but I have found in this watch under macro video, as well as a previous Ball GMT watch that I've owned, the seconds hand where the tritium tube sits in does seem to have a small fiber that got stuck. Now I do kind of sympathize, because for sure these tritium tubes significantly outweigh the hands themselves. So getting them to adhere to each of the hands, especially when they're finely polished and razor sharp like they are, must be difficult to do. But nevertheless, I do find that that is a minor QC issue that appeared on 2 Ball watches that I've seen. But I do want to reiterate, you're really not going to notice that with the naked eye. It just kind of cropped up under my macro video. And lastly, my personal preference is to have a more standard fold-over deployment style clasp with some forms of micro adjustment. Again, there are half links here to fine-tune the adjustment to your wrist, but I do find if, like, say your wrist swells up during the summer, there's no toolless form of relief on this butterfly style clasp. And it also takes a little bit longer to take on and off your wrist. There's that extra deployment, and then closing this up requires a fair amount of pressure, although it does add a feeling of security on your wrist. So, and lastly, let's talk about the pricing for this watch. So currently this is a limited edition, and I think on the website you can pre-order it. It's coming in at a price tag of $2,249 US. And at around that $2,200 price range, I do think it is justified. I mean, if you consider just the quality of the coloring of the dial, how well the case is executed, along with all of the shock and anti-magnetic properties associated with this watch, I do find that there is good value there. But I love the fact that they are donating proceeds of this watch to support the Salvation Army. So again, I do encourage you, if you like this watch, definitely pre-order it, try and get it while you still can. So guys, that's my overview of the Ball Engineer Marvelight 3 Chronometer Carrying Edition. I do want to really thank Ball again for lending in this watch. I've really enjoyed my time with it, and it's one of the best watches I've seen so far this year. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. I hope you guys can stay safe, and as always, I'll catch you guys in the next one.